James Robinson is being disrespected by the fantasy football community. Now, not everybody, but if you look at his ranking over on Fantasy Pros right now, he is being disrespected in my opinion. I am here to tell you why he is ranked way too low by everybody and why you should keep an eye on him heading into your draft this season. So this is going to kick off a little series for me. It's going to basically be a player breakdown. I'm going to look at people who might be overvalued, undervalued, value just right, whoever it is. Leave it in the comments below who you want me to talk about, and I'll do a player breakdown. It'll be fun. We'll all learn together. So I'm going to take you through some different things here. First, I'm going to talk about the 2020 Jacksonville Jaguars as a team. Then I'm going to talk about 2020 James Robinson, the changes that they're going to go through. This team is probably going to go through the most amount of changes this offseason than any other team. So I'm going to talk about the new head coach, OC, new players, all that kind of stuff in this video. So if you like this content, hit that like button, subscribe, really appreciate it. So let's go ahead and get into it. So the first thing that I'm going to show you is his ranking currently over on Fantasy Pros. Now, Fantasy Pros, if you're not familiar with it, it is a very good site. It's free to use and everything. All the sites that I'm going to be using today are going to be in the description down below, so you can go and check them out. Some of them you do have to pay for. Some of them are free resources. Fantasy Pros is a free resource, and it is a very good resource, especially when you get close to draft time. It takes all of the experts in the industry and basically takes all their rankings and comes up with an average. It also takes the ADP of each and every single player and shows you where they're being drafted. Let's look at James Robinson right now. Currently, he is ranked as running back number 19. It's not terrible, right? Maybe you think that's fine. Maybe you think that's good. You think he's a little bit too low, maybe too high, whatever the case may be. I'm going to tell you why I think that is too low. I'm going to give you stats to back it up. Of course, some of this is also my opinion. I'll tell you when it's my opinion. But I think 19 is too low for James Robinson. So let's first look at the 2020 Jacksonville Jaguars as a team. So the second site that we're going to use here is Fantasy Outsiders. Now, Fantasy Outsiders really breaks everything down. It's I like to say, a nerdy fantasy football site where it has a ton of stats, a lot of stats that let you dive deeper into fantasy football. So the first thing that we're going to look at here is DVOA. You've probably heard some fantasy analysts say this before. DVOA, basically in the most simplest term, if you don't know what this is taking a player's stats, giving them a certain amount of points for their stats, and then comparing that to like league average players, right? The league average, say quarterback in this circumstance, because we're going to look at quarterbacks. So it's going to take, say you have two quarterbacks that complete two 10-yard passes, right? It takes those quarterbacks. Well, quarterback number one completed a 10-yard pass for a touchdown, so that player is going to get more points, where the other player completed a 10-yard pass on a 1st and 20, right? So it's a good pass, but it's not as good as the first one. So it gives them a certain amount of points. Is it completely accurate? No. It has its flaws, but this is the first thing that we're going to look at. So DVOA, let's look at the Jacksonville Jaguars quarterback here. So the starter to start the season was Gardner Minshew. As you can see, he is currently ranked as quarterback number 27, 11% below a replacement level quarterback, basically an average quarterback in the NFL. So not very good. Now, he wasn't the only quarterback. Let's go down. You have to scroll down the list to find the next quarterbacks here. So let's find the next quarterbacks that also played for Jacksonville this year. The first one is Jake Luton, or Lutton. I think it's Jake Luton. So it's minus 46% or 48%, 48.6%. So not very good as well. And you also have another player in Mike Lennon, 19.8%, right? So not very good as well. Now, the quarterbacks obviously weren't the only reason why this team was bad. They certainly didn't help, but also they were deprived of playmakers. Basically, the only person you really have on this offense is James Robinson, also DJ Chark, who was really banged up in the beginning of the season, and for most of the season, he was on the injury report, missed some games as well. You have Laviska Shenault, rookie, kind of an athlete type of player who was also banged up a little bit, missed a couple of games. Then for tight end, you really don't, I mean, that's basically it for wide receiver. Then for tight end, you have Tyler Eifert, who I didn't even know he was still playing. And you have James O'Shaughnessy, who couldn't even beat out Tyler Eifert, right? So not a good group of players. Now, I don't want to say not a good group of players because any NFL player is basically the cream of the crop, and I don't want to disrespect them. But in terms of fantasy football, like these guys weren't that productive, right? And this team wasn't very good, as you can tell, as they were 1-15, right? Won the first game of the season and then lost 15 games in a row. So all of this is kind of background to James Robinson. Next, let's take a look into the defense. This is also a free site, Pro Football Reference. You guys have probably seen this before. It's also a really good site to build your projections on if you're going to make your own projections, right? So the first thing that we're going to look at is their defensive ranking, right? So a defensive ranking, pretty bad in terms of everything. You have points for, or points against, basically. They were 31st, so second worst team in the NFL, gave up the second most yards in the NFL. In terms of turnovers, did not turn the ball over. They're second least in sacks with 18. This team was just bad all across the board. You look at their passing yards that they gave up, their rushing yards that they gave up, the plays that they gave up. This team was just bad all across the board on the defensive side of the ball. Now, that's not to say that this defense can't get better. They were extremely banged up in the secondary, have some really good pieces to build around: Miles Jack, CJ Henderson, Josh Allen. So you have good players to build upon, and I do think that this defense will get better. But last year, they were terrible, and a defense that is terrible and playing from behind is not going to help your running back. So the fact that James Robinson put up the season he did with this was, in my opinion, extraordinary. So let's get into the next thing that we're going to talk about, and that's going to be James Robinson himself. James Robinson last year was fantastic. I don't care what anybody says. I don't care that he's an undrafted free agent. Whatever the case may be, he was a stud. As you can tell over here, this is player profile. It's very good. It's a free site as well. It's very good in terms of rookie running backs that you're not quite sure if you don't really watch college football that much. You can plug them in here and you can get a player profile, their 40 time, all this kind of stuff, right? So the first thing that we're going to look at with James Robinson here is going to be his 40-yard dash. Not very good, right? As you can see, 33rd percentile. And basically what kept him, in my opinion, undrafted was his speed. They weren't sure that he was going to make it in the NFL because his speed wasn't there. But as I'll show you in some clips here in a little bit, he plays much faster than the speed. But when you watch film on James Robinson, there's a couple things that definitely pop out. Number one is vision. His vision is incredible. Number two is burst. And it shows right here. 92nd percentile is his burst score. This is his burst score. So bursting through little holes, getting to the second level. He's very good at doing that. And as you can see here, 92nd percentile, anything over 130 is extraordinary for a running back. Also, spark athlete in terms of his build, his speed, his power, all of that. 89th percentile. His college denominator coming out of college, basically all of his total yards for his team, touchdowns, 89 or 98th percentile. Anything over 40% is extraordinary for a running back. So well above that. BMI, anything over 32 is extraordinary for a running back. So very durable. And also he did get hurt this year, had an ankle injury, missed a couple of games. I do think he probably could have came back, but the team was awful and they knew that he was going to be the running back of the future. So they just decided to sit him. So all of this that we looked at so far is stuff that you could have found before he came into the NFL, right? Another big thing that definitely hurt him, he went to Illinois State, which is an FCS school, not an FBS school. So not the cream of the crop, right? Definitely hurt him a little bit. So I'm going to point out some stats in the 2020 season that on this site, and I'll talk about some other stats that I think are key. Number one, he saw basically all the touches in the backfield, right? It was basically him, and that was it. I don't expect that to really continue. I do think he's going to be the lead back in this backfield, but to be number one, I don't think he's going to be number one anymore, but we'll still see a large share of the backfield going forward. Another stat that I want to look at real quick is evaded tacklers, number 5 in that category, and then also yards created, number 6. He didn't have the best offensive line. Now, it wasn't the worst offensive line, but in terms of creating yards before contact, they weren't the greatest, and he created a lot of yards. What was picked up after the play was blocked. So number 6 in that category. And one last stat that I want to look at for James Robinson real quick, point out, is game script. So minus 8.2 points, right? So they're constantly playing from behind, number 32 for running backs, right? So always behind, had a terrible situation. So the fact that he's able to put up those numbers while always playing from behind really speaks volume to the type of player that he is. So let's go ahead and look at the DVOA for James Robinson. James Robinson's DVOA, and DVOA is his stats, basically his points that he's able to score above replacement level, and also it takes in the defenses that he played into consideration as well. So his points that's awarded to him by the system. So let's look at where he's ranked for running backs right now. So for running backs right now, he's 25th, which obviously is not the best. You don't like to see him as the 25th running back right now. He's ahead of guys, say, like David Montgomery, Ezekiel Elliott, Kenyon Drake. So let's also look at another thing, though, because Zeke right here, to me, is interesting. Zeke also had a bad team. Zeke is 27th. So it's pretty interesting that when you go back to 2019, let's see who the leader for DVOA was. So in 2019, the leader for DVOA is Raheem Mostert, and Zeke is number 4. So instead of being all the way down there in the bottom of the 20s, he's number 4. Now, could that also have something to do with the team that he played on? I think so. Zeke's team this year was awful, right? Had so many injuries, so many offensive linemen got hurt. You have Dak getting hurt. So the fact that he's placing all the way down there in the bottom 20s, in my opinion, is similar to James Robinson, who had a terrible team around him. That's only going to get better this offseason. So the fact that James Robinson is ranked that low, in my opinion, I'm not too worried about it, because if you just watch film, you can see that he's an NFL running back. He's able to pop off the screen. And I'm going to show you a couple clips here that proves the point. So in this clip here, it's against the Chargers, Los Angeles Chargers. This is from Game Pass. This is the coach's view, all right? So you have a couple different options. This is coach's film. So basically, I'm going to be showing you James Robinson here. He's in the backfield. I'm only going to show you 2 plays. Obviously, I could show you a ton of film. So let's go ahead and look at the first play here. So James Robinson, this is a 14-yard carry, and you can go to certain plays, which is awesome as well, and just go to that play. So I'm just going to let it play here. All right, I'm going to go back and we're going to kind of break it down here for a second or two, okay? So James Robinson, obviously, you can see here. Let's just watch the first thing, all right? So the first thing you can see here, right, is I'm not sure who this is. I don't know if this is Joey Bosa. I don't think that's Joey Bosa. I don't know who this is right here, but they blow up the play. They totally crush the offensive lineman off the ball. He's basically in the backfield. The offensive lineman is able to recover just enough to give James Robinson a tiny bit of space. But as a Steelers fan, no offense to Benny Snell or James Conner, in my opinion, this would have been a loss if I'm a Steelers fan watching this game, okay? James Robinson's able to make a little move in the backfield, create enough space to be able to get around that and start to get upfield. Now you can see here, where is he going to go? One thing that he is very good at, he's a patient, right? He's a patient runner. He's not so patient as like Le'Veon Bell patient, but he's patient enough to allow his lineman to set up a little bit of a lane, and then he's able to burst through. So as you can see here, his linemen are on their blocks. There's going to be a little bit of a crease here, and then he's just going to get through that crease, fit through that crease, fit his body through the crease, right? That's very hard to do. I'm telling you, very hard to do. You don't see a lot of running backs doing it. So he's able to fit his body through the little tiny crease and is able to shoot through there and get upfield to the second level. So just a small one clip shows him able to fit through the crease, get upfield to the second level. You like to see that in running backs. Now let's look at the second clip here. Second clip. This one's for a 13-yard carry. So let's look at this one. I'm going to just let it play through, and then we'll kind of break it down. So back-to-back runs, and as you can see, the speed there, obviously at the end, isn't the best. He's not going to take a run to the house, beat everybody just because of his speed, right? But what he's very good at, as you can see here, his vision. Number one is vision. And in the last play, I didn't really mention that, but the vision to be able to find that little crease, hit the crease, right? So here, he sees there's not a whole lot going on here. Right off the bat, everything's clogged up. So what's he do? He's able to see, and this is something that is very important as a running back as well. He's able to see things before they happen, right? So he knows that this side over here is all sealed off, and he has one defender to beat. It's up to him. Him and that defender, can he beat the defender? So let's look at it. So what he's able to do is he's not going to be able to juke people out with a massive jump cut or anything like that. What he does, he lowers his shoulder, does a little spin move, is able to get off the tackler and get to the outside, get up to speed and get to the outside. So once again, What he's showcasing is he's able to be patient. He's not just running. And once again, as a Steelers fan, I would see it all the time. James Conner would be right in the offensive line's ass here, just falling down for a 2-yard game. But what he's able to do, he's patient. He's waiting for the blocks to set up. Sees a little opening on the outside that he has one guy to beat, is able to go out there, make the spin move, get off the tackle, and the rest picks up a 14-yard gain. So 2 plays, obviously not a whole bunch of plays. Could go on and on all day about different types of plays, but 2 plays, good enough. So let's go to the next part here. So next, let's look at Pro Football Focus. Pro Football Focus, you have to pay for a subscription to have access to these kind of stats, but if you're into that kind of thing, then definitely worth it. I like it. So whatever floats your boat. So let's look at yards after contact, right? So yards after contact right now, James Robinson's tied for 13th with Kareem Hunt. Kareem Hunt, in my mind, is a very good running back in the NFL. If you watch him, everybody bounces off of him. You have right around him Chris Carson, also very good. David Montgomery, not too far down. Now let's look at some guys who are a little bit further down. Jonathan Taylor, 2.95 yards after contact. Let's continue to go down the list. We have Zeke down here. James Conner, Cam Akers, Leonard Fournette. Everybody thinks he's a very powerful runner, 2.7 yards after contact. We also down here have Antonio Gibson, right? Everybody seems high on him, yet he's down here right now. Obviously, this one stat doesn't define a person as a running back, but it is important to have yards after contact, to be able to finish runs, to be able to pick up more yardage, even in the hole. Say you get an arm around you, you're able to break through that arm tackle and get to the next level, right? With all these stats that I just gave you, let's think back to how bad this Jacksonville team was, right? They have the first overall pick, 1-15, lost 15 straight games in the NFL this year. So they were not a good team. Think back to Ezekiel Elliott with the DVOA this year, bottom 20s, last year, number 4. How bad this team was, how bad that Dallas team was this year, that offense really, how bad that team was compared to last year, right? So what does a good team do for you? I don't expect this team to be good next year, but definitely better. And with that, I do think James Robinson as a player has better stats because of that, when he already put up really, really good stats this year on a very shitty team. So now let's take a look at how the team has already changed and how that is going to improve him heading into next season. So the first thing is going to be Urban Meyer. Now, this is where I'm going to get a little bit narrative based, okay? This is going to be a little bit narrative based, not so much stat based. So first thing is going to be Urban Meyer. Now, in my opinion, Urban Meyer is going to come in here and he's going to change the culture. These type of coaches, they're just very used to winning and they build a winner's mentality in the locker room, in my opinion. So the team just kind of changes overnight. Now, I don't expect this team to be one of the best teams in the league. No, definitely not. But I expect this team to believe in themselves, especially these young players, believe that they can win. And I think that's going to start at the top with Urban Meyer. Now, we also probably going to have Trevor Lawrence. He's going to probably draft, I'd imagine, Trevor Lawrence. I don't want to say for sure in case something crazy happens, but you're also going to probably have a different quarterback. But when he was at Ohio State, Urban Meyer was at Ohio State, they were running the ball nearly like 56, 58% of the time. Except as last year there, it was basically an even split between passing attempts and running attempts, basically 50-50 split. So he's running the ball a lot more. Now, it also, you have to take into consideration, I went back and looked at a lot of the data. Number one, you have quarterbacks. He's had quarterbacks that can run the football. So you have quarterbacks getting a decent amount of the running attempts on the offense. You also have this team as one of the best teams in the country every single year in Ohio State. So constantly playing with the lead as well. So that's definitely going to bolster. So now let's take a look at his offense coordinator and Darrell Bevell. Darrell Bevell was the offense coordinator for the Detroit Lions the past 2 years. In Detroit, it was a very pass-happy team, right? Basically passing the ball over 60% of the time those 2 seasons. Now, you have to take into consideration that they also did not have very good defense, and this just wasn't a very good team. They went 8-23-1 over the past 2 seasons. So, not a good team. Let's go back to Seattle. His last 2 years in Seattle, they weren't that good of a team as well. Didn't really have the run game. They had Thomas Rawls, who was always a little bit banged up, but they were still running the ball around 44% of the time, 43% of the time. Let's go back and look at when they had the Super Bowl runs, right? When they had the Super Bowl runs and they had Marshawn Lynch. They had Marshawn Lynch. They were running the ball nearly 55%, 54% of the time. So they were running the ball a lot when they were a very good team. Also, if you go back and look at Minnesota, he was running the ball a lot in Minnesota because he had Adrian Peterson, and this team was also a pretty decent team as well. The 1 year with Brett Favre, they did pass, I think they ran the ball like 46% of the time, but still, that's good for an NFL team. This isn't going to be like a college team running 60% of the time, right? It's going to be an NFL team that's probably going to be running the ball, I'd say, around like, hopefully they want to run the ball probably around like 45, 48% of the time. It's going to depend on how good this team is. So let's take all that into consideration to try to build the projections for James Robinson heading into next season. So while building my own projections for James Robinson and basically Jacksonville heading into next season, I looked at two teams to really try to draw comps from. The first team is the Las Vegas Raiders. And why Las Vegas is because, number one, they're in the middle of the pack this year. They're 8-8. And I think Jacksonville, I don't think they get to 8-8. I think they'll be a little bit worse than that, but I do think that they have a chance to kind of be in the middle of the pack in terms of a team, because they do have some good pieces around them this season to build around. It just depends on what they do in free agency and in the draft. So 8-8, I looked at this team also because John Gruden is an offensive-minded coach like Urban Meyer is. I also looked at the Carolina Panthers and with the head coach Matt Rule, because he was a college football coach that took a stab at the pros to be a pro football coach. So I looked at these two teams, try to draw comparisons between the two, and made my projections for James Robinson heading into next season. So what I also did is, I'm assuming that they're going to draft Trevor Lawrence. I looked at Justin Herbert. I looked at Trevor Lawrence's college stats. They're kind of a similar player, right? So I kind of built Trevor Lawrence's stats along like Justin Herbert a little bit. He's not going to have as good as a season as Justin Herbert, in my opinion. So I kind of lowered his stats a little bit based upon that. And basically what I have for James Robinson, after kind of doing all the stats for everybody, it's hard too, because I'd imagine that they're going to bring in somebody. They have a Zigbo there right now in the backfield with James Robinson, but I'd imagine that they're going to probably draft somebody or have a free agent. I'd still think that James Robinson is going to be the lead back. They might bring in somebody for like a third down role or something like that. We'll see. But right now I have him projected as basically being like a bell cow back in this offense. So with all of that information in mind, and it's a lot of information that I threw at you, a lot of stats, a lot of this, I hope, it helps you a little bit. Some of these sites you can go to totally free. Some of them you do have to pay for it, but you can check them out and everything. So with all of that in mind, James Robinson, this is what I currently have him projected for. Now, once again, very early, a lot of this can totally change. One thing that you definitely want to be looking at is what beat reporters are saying during training camp. What beat reporters are saying is going to be vital to this situation. Is he going to be the lead back? In my mind, there's nothing that says differently about him being the lead back. To me, the only thing that people have to knock on him is he was undrafted free agent. When you have guys like Priest Holmes, he was undrafted free agent. You have Arian Foster, he was undrafted free agent. Dominique Rhodes was undrafted free agent. These are all running backs that had very good seasons. So there's no reason to believe that he's just going to fall off a cliff. He can definitely produce. Showed it this year, was very good on film. If you go and watch film, he was very good. So I think he's going to be the lead back. And these are the stats that I'm going to be projecting for him as of right now. This also, once again, very early. Currently, what I have the team running 1,023 plays. They're going to run the ball 46% of the time, so about 471 runs that they're going to have here. And also, like, some of those runs are going to be Trevor Lawrence. I think he's going to run the ball around like 60 times. I have him at 63 times. So currently what I have for James Robinson slotted for him is 263 carries, 1,241 yards, 9 touchdowns, rushing touchdowns, 45 receptions on 57 targets for 333 yards and 3 touchdowns and a fumble. That's currently what I have him projected to get. In terms of 16 games, he's going to have 246.8 fantasy points per game. Now, let's take that because most fantasy seasons don't go, a full season. It's typically 15 games because they take off week 17. So in terms of 15 games this year, that's going to put him at 234.3 points, which would put him right back as running back number 7. That's exactly where he finished last year behind Jonathan Taylor. So currently, if you're looking at Fantasy Pros, right now, Fantasy Pros, like I said, they have him currently ranked as running back number 19, right? Running back number 19, the best rank for him is running back 13. To me, 19 is definitely too low. I'd rather personally take him over Antonio Gibson, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I like him even over Miles Sanders, Joe Mixon. I'd rather have James Robinson over these guys, in my opinion. So maybe you differ. I'd like to hear your opinion on the matter. Leave your comments below. Hopefully you found this video helpful. Once again, if things change, I will definitely be making another video for him. And this is just the start of the series. I have a lot of stuff planned. There's going to be more videos coming out next week. Make sure you check that out. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.